Um, I woke up this morning and I was fine, right? Everything was great. And I landed a new client today. Someone called me out the clear blue and told me how 5 years ago I impacted their lives. And they're still reaping the benefits from that experience that they had with me. However,
she's experienced some things that, for someone who has never gone through it, is almost traumatic to hear.
When I was just a child, the world was against me. When I was just a child, no one would protect me. I knew I'd be different from what the others say. I knew I would be something greater than what my future says. I know I fall and make mistakes. I know, I know.
A few days later, we end up at another babysitter's house who we had to drive to get to. And this was also an older lady. She had a young grandson who was my age, and she had an older grandson who was about 21. And by this time, I was 8, and my brother was 4. And she was not nice. You know, she would just say really mean things about me being a darky. And one day she looked at me and my brother and she said, "I'm going out." She never said anything before, but this day she says, "I'm going out and I'll be back in a couple of hours. You do whatever he tells you to do." He was her grandson. He was the 21-year-old grandson. And so we said, okay. And so we sat in front of the TV and we watched the Cosby Show. And the grandson said, "Okay, y'all have to come upstairs with me now." And we had a bedroom that we slept in because, of course, my mom worked the night shift. So I don't know if you've ever been in a position where you knew that something wasn't right. Like everything in your body like raised an alarm, but you couldn't really put your finger on it. Well, that day, even though I was 8, my alarms were going off like crazy. Why couldn't we just sit in front of the TV like we normally did? I mean, the babysitter wasn't there. You know, why do we have to go upstairs? So we walk up the steps, and it seemed like it was like a lot of steps, but we walked up the steps and he put us in this room. And the way this room was structured, it when you walked into the bedroom, there was a bed in the middle of the room, and the wall, the main wall that was in front of the bed, were dresser doors. They were dressers. That blocked the doorway. And so he came in the room and he said, "You stay," talking to my little brother. And he said, "But you come with me." And so I said, "I don't want to come with you." And he said, didn't my grandmother tell you, you have to do what I tell you to do? And I said, yes. And he said, then you come with me. So I came with him, and he walked me into the bathroom, and he said, you're going to take all of your clothes off right now. And, you know, I don't know, everything was going through my mind at that moment. I was trying to figure out what was about to take place. I looked to my left, and he was running bath water. And I looked down on the floor. It was green and white tiles. I looked up. I saw the window. I saw the toilet. And then I happened to notice myself again, and I felt tears falling down my face. And all I could think of was, I think I'm about to die. I think like this is it for me. So I didn't move. I stayed very, very, very stiff. I didn't move. And he said, I told you to take off your clothes. But I didn't speak, and I didn't move. I just stood there. And so he took them off for me. And as he got on his knees and took my clothes off, he stated, my grandmother told me to do this. I don't really want to do this, but my grandmother told me to do this. So he picked me up, he put me in the tub, he proceeded to wash me. And I cried. I just didn't cry out loud though. I didn't cry out loud. I just felt the overflow of the tears flowing down my face, because I knew whatever was about to happen was something that was going to change, you know, everything in me at that moment in time.
If you think about it, generally people at the age of 8 are learning addition, subtraction. They're learning to read at a better level. But at that particular place in Dee's life, she was having to navigate traumatic experiences with older people who were essentially taking advantage of her on a consistent basis.
When the bath was over, he dried me off, and he walked me to the bedroom and told me to sit on the bed, and he walked out. And as I stated earlier, there was a dresser, there were 2 dressers that were connected that opened that was the in-between between the bedroom that my brother was now in and that I was in. And when he walked out that room, I started trying to figure out how to get in between those dressers. So I started banging on the dresser, and I called my brother, and I started screaming my brother's name, and now he's screaming my name on the other end, and we're both banging on the dressers from each opposite end of the room, screaming. I'm help me. And he says, I don't know how to get to you. The door's locked. I'm locked in here. The door's locked. And I said, move the dresser. And he said, I can't move the dresser. You move the dresser. And I said, I can't move the dresser. And we were screaming. And then the guy comes back in the room, and he says, listen, you have to settle down. He says, you have to settle down. I don't really want to do this, but I have to do this. My grandmother said, I have to do this. And so he picks me up, he lays me on the bed, and proceeds to physically assault me in every way you can possibly think of. And oh man, I screamed with everything in me. I ran, I screamed, I ran, I screamed, I ran, and I screamed. And he held me down, and he continued to thrust himself on me as if I was a little rag doll.
when the babysitter's grandson raped me, I hated him, and I hated the grandmother, and I hated my mom too. I hated the police. I hated everybody because I felt like I wasn't being heard. And I felt like nobody was really interested in protecting me. I felt like he got away with it, and everybody felt like that was okay, and it wasn't. And I was angry, and I'm still angry. But I'm angry because I feel like there's nothing that I can do about it.
My brother banged on that door, that dresser door, crying and screaming, and I was calling him, crying and screaming. And when he was done, he picked me up, walked me to the bedroom, and told me not to say a word. So I stayed with my brother, and we looked at each other, and we cried for about an hour or so. And he finally opened up the door and told us to go downstairs and sit back in front of the TV because his grandmother wasn't coming back. And so I was so sore, I could barely sit down. So I decided not to. And when the grandmother came back, she got angry because I wouldn't sit. And but I didn't say anything because he told me not to. And when I when I wouldn't sit down, you know, she kind of popped me on my butt, which hurt. And she said, "Sit down." And I was just crying and just, you know, shut up. How was it? You know, was it good? How was it? Was it good? And I said, ma'am, you know, it was all I kept saying. And she said, never mind. And she kept going. And our little grandson was there by this time. And so we played. I played with her little grandson, and my brother and I played. I just walked funny because I was in pain. And so this particular night, my mom came and picked us up early. It was dark, but it wasn't the next morning. And so we get in the car, and my mom, it was like traffic on this little street. And I said, Ma, I gotta tell you something, but you're gonna be mad at me. You're gonna be angry with me. And she said, what? What is it? And I said, you know, the babysitter's grandson, the older one? And she said, yeah. I said, he put his penis in me, his TT. He put his TT in my poo-poo. That's what we called it then, TT and poo-poo. And I remember her screeching, hearing the car screech, what did you say? She turned around and looked in the back seat at me. She said, what did you just say? And I said, her grandson, the older one, he put his TT in my poo-poo, and I hurt so bad. I'm hurting. And she went and, I guess, parked the car. I don't remember. She brought my brother and I back inside to this lady's house and told us to go play. And we did. And then into the conversation, she called me back in the living room. She was yelling. She was screaming at the lady, angry, and the lady was screaming at her. And she said, "Tell me what you told me in the car." And I said, "I'm gonna get in trouble." And she said, "You're gonna get in trouble if you don't tell me. Tell me what you said in the car." And I said, "Her grandson, he put his TT in my poo-poo." And she, the grandmother was like, "She's lying, she's a liar, that didn't happen." Oh, my mom went crazy. So she called the police, and the police came to the house. The grandson wasn't there. They told my mom to take me to the hospital, and I went to the hospital, and they confirmed everything that I said. And then that was it. I began to live my life in pure fear. I decided right then and right there that my mom didn't love me, and that if I was gonna protect myself, that I was gonna be the one that was gonna do it. And everything from that point in my life literally changed. My whole disposition, the way I spoke to people, the way I thought about things. I was a nervous wreck for the most part, always looking over my shoulder in fear, always believing someone was out to hurt me. And I became a very rebellious little girl, because in my mind, I was trying to figure out how to leave my mom, how to leave her. I'll never forget my uncle coming out there, driving out there in the middle of the night, riding up and down the street looking for me. And I would run away. And the moment I even saw somebody coming after, I would knock on random people's doors and say, "Can you bring me in? Can you bring me in? Can you bring me in?" And my mom couldn't work and keep an eye on me, So she moved us in. We moved again to another part of Baltimore where we had like family living in the house. And I think she felt like if we had family living in the house, then she had more control. But in all actuality, we lived in an area where I actually found more freedom, I actually found, I created friends whose parents worked as much as mine did, and they had freedom. And so there was this one young lady who had like a mark on her nose right here. She wore these big, thick glasses. So she used to always tell me, "I'm a grown woman in a little girl's body, and I think you are too. So we're gonna be friends. And we're grown women." And I said, "Okay, I can be grown. I don't wanna be here anyway. I can be grown." And she said, "Well, grown women talk to grown men." And I said, "So what you working with?" And so she told me that she had met these guys, and she wanted me to talk. She wanted me to talk to one of them. And so we called them, and they were on the phone, and they talked to us. They were in their 30s. We were 11. And I established a friendship with one of them. And at this point, I was literally just out of control and just looking for freedom. I don't know, is that the best word? Is looking for a way out.
Many people considered her more mature for her age, and she had thoughts that and beliefs that she was an adult, because in some ways she had to take on some of the responsibilities of an adult at a very early age.
And so after talking to this guy for days upon days upon days, maybe weeks, maybe even months, one day my mom let me know that I did something. Maybe I didn't clean up, or I did something, and she was coming home after work to spank me, because I was always getting spankings. I got spankings for running away. I got spankings for saying the word lie. I got spankings for just seems like everything. And so I knew she was coming to spank me, and I decided that this was the day that she wasn't going to do that anymore. So I called him and I told him, and he said, I'm going to call you a cab and it's going to pick you up and bring you to me. And I said, okay. So the cab came out in front of my house. I jumped in the cab, and it took me to the west side of town on Evanston Avenue, and dropped me off right in front of his house. And I would never forget walking in and sitting on the sofa and having a feeling that I needed to leave, but I didn't. And, he sat across from me and asked me, was I a little girl or was I an adult? And I said, I'm a little girl, because at this point I felt like I needed to run, because the feeling that I was feeling was the same feeling that I felt when that babysitter's grandson asked me to come upstairs, or rather told me to come upstairs. And so I said, I'm a little girl. And he said, nope, you're an adult today. And he said, do you know what's about to happen? And I said, I got an idea. And he said, the question is, do you love me? On the phone, you said you love me. So I just need to know that you love me. And I said, well, I do. And he said, well, then come on back to my bedroom. And I said, I think I'd rather go home instead and love you from my house. And he said, but you're in my house now. So you're gonna love me from my house. And so, he walked me to his bedroom, and I don't know how blunt you want me to be, but all I can tell you is I had the most frightening yet enjoyable moment of my entire life. It was very weird because my feelings, were mixed. I was in fear, but this guy was going down on me, so I felt things that I had never felt before. So it was a good feeling, but it was a horrible feeling. And, it was, I was just in a very confused type of space. I cried. I cried through the whole thing. I cried through the whole entire thing. I cried. But it wasn't a screaming, yelling, help, help cry. It was, I don't know what the heck is happening right now cry, And this went on for hours. I mean, hours. And then the phone rang, and it was my mother. And she had read my diary and figured out that I was in a relationship with an older man and told him the police was coming. And so he kicked me out. And so now I'm walking up and down the street at 11 years old in Baltimore on Evanston Avenue, I really don't know what to think. You know, this guy just did things to me that other babysitter's grandson did, which was like horrible. Yet I felt good at the same time. Yet I was angry because he kicked me out. Yet I was happy to be away from my mother. Yet I was scared as hell because I was walking down the street in a space that I just didn't know. Yet is all I can say over and over and over again. Just crazy feelings and emotions. And I ended up, this guy was walking down the street and he saw me and he was like, "What are you doing out here by yourself?" And I was like, "You don't even want to know how my day went." And it started raining. And so he put his jacket over me and said, "Come on, I'm gonna take you back to my place." And at this point, I had been walking for hours. I didn't know where I was gonna go. I didn't want to go back home. I didn't want to go back home because my mom had already threatened to beat me before she had even gotten home. So I knew now she was really gonna kill me. I didn't want to be there, you know, but I didn't know where to go. So I went back to his house. And he asked me questions. He was nice. He asked me questions. "What are you doing? Where are you at? Where are your parents?" You know, he took all my clothes off and gave me a shirt. He didn't touch me or anything. And he dried them so I would have dry clothes. And he asked me, did I want to go back home? And I told him no. And so he said, "Well, you can stay here for the night, but when the sun comes up, you have to leave because I don't know what kind of mess you're in." So I said, "Okay." And so I'm kind of like racing in my mind, like, where am I going to go tomorrow? What am I going to do? I only have one set of clothes. I don't have any money. I don't know anybody. You know, what am I going to do? And so my clothes were drying and I was in a shirt and he said, "You can sleep here tonight." So I laid on the bed. I was kind of laying like this. And he said, "You can close your eyes. It's okay. You're okay. You're safe." And so I thought for a moment, safe. That's not something I'm familiar with. So I like that idea of being safe. So I closed my eyes and then I felt him touching me. But when he did, I jumped. In my mind, I thought, not here, not tonight. And so he said, "What's wrong?" You know, and he started rubbing my leg. And I just started crying profusely, just bawling. And I cried so much that it freaked him out. And he said, "Fuck this shit. You can't stay here tonight." And so he took my clothes out the dryer. He said he threw them at me. And he said, "Put these clothes on." So I hurried up. And I was wiping my tears and I put the clothes on. And he walks me out the door and he takes me to a payphone around the corner. And he said, "What's your phone number?" So I gave him my phone number. And he called my mother. And he put me in a cab home. When I got home, my mother beat the bricks off of me. But that was a very interesting night because I laid there and my hormones were going crazy. And when I say that, I remember me laying there and my vagina pulsating, but me crying profusely. I don't think it was the spanking. I don't know. I think it was just everything, you know. It's just like, what is going on? And at this point, I was in 6th grade. And so I got up the next day, I went to school, and I decided to chill out for a while and to stay there until I could figure out what my plan was going to be to run away again. That was my mission.
it was thought that she had consented as an 11-year-old to this sexual act with a man who was, I think, over 30 at the time.
I kind of recall her personality shifting about maybe at the age of 11 or 12, but that was during the time when she was being molested. Had no clue that that was going on. Of course, us being that young, it wasn't something common to talk about. I imagine it being very embarrassing for her, but I noticed that her whole disposition changed. She was a little more kind of like agitated, didn't really want to be bothered in a sense at times, but she was always Kitty. And with us being as close as we were, eventually we talked about it. I asked her what was going on, and she told me, because we've always had a very honest friendship, relationship, and she told me what was going on, and I didn't know what to do. Of course, we're children. You don't really know what to do. And in our community, when stuff like that happens, we're always taught that you pretty much like, you keep quiet, especially if it's in the family, whatever else. You don't talk about it. You just kind of keep it to yourself.
Experiencing at least one event of sexual trauma at that age is pervasive. The damage is pervasive. And so to experience multiple traumas over the course of years, it is extremely difficult to kind of power through that. The mood swings, the depression, the anxiety.
I was going to church and, living life, and I never forget some of the people at church was like telling my mom, she looks pregnant. Her stomach is big, her legs are swollen, she looks pregnant. My mom was like, she's not pregnant. And then me getting bigger and bigger. And then my mom one day took me to Planned Parenthood. And they told me to pee in a cup. And I peed in the cup. And I put water in the cup too. Because I think at this point I knew I was pregnant. And I was cool with it. And so it came back, the test was negative. Came back home. And I thought, I'm pregnant. So now I got somebody who's gonna really love me. This is really cool. I got somebody who's gonna really love me, and I don't have anything to worry about. And I started eating crazy things. My mom started noticing, and by this point, she's suspect. So she started fixing things she knew I hated, like liver. I hated liver. And so she puts the liver in front of my plate. I said, can you put some mustard on it? She said, mustard? I said, can you put some mustard on it, please? And she looked at me and she said, you're pregnant. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. But I ate that liver with that mustard and she knew. So the next day, I didn't go to school. She took me back to Planned Parenthood. But this time I decided I wasn't gonna put water in my cup. It was what it was. Whatever it was gonna be, that's what it was gonna be. So I took the test, came back, that I was 11 years old and I was pregnant. And so the moment that my mom found out, she immediately started calling around to try to get me an abortion. I was 5.5 months pregnant. So trying to abort someone in 1989 at 5.5 months, it's just not normal. So the only way that she could do that was to fly me to New York to some special clinic so that they could take the baby. So she had bought the plane tickets. We were preparing for the flight. My two aunts and my mom took me to lunch, because by this time everybody in the family knew. And we were at Bennigan's. They had this salad that was so big, I ate every bit of it. And we came back and my mom was in the bathroom And I had decided the night before that I wasn't going to go to New York, whether she wanted me to go or not. So my plan was to either talk her out of it, or when she fell asleep, to pack my things and run away again. So just in case, I just packed my things, because she never really listened to me before, so what would make her listen to me now? So I went into the bathroom with all my things packed, hidden in the closet. Went into the bathroom and I said, hey, Ma, listen, I know that it is not cool for me to be pregnant at 11. And I know you've already bought the plane ticket, and I know you want me to go to New York, but I don't want to get rid of this baby. And she said, but you're 11. What do you know about raising a child? I said, I don't know anything other than helping you raise my brother, being his big sister. But what I do know is that he's human. He's alive. I can feel him moving. And if we get rid of him, then how's he going to be the next president? And she said, what? I said, he could be the next president of the United States, the next Dr. Martin Luther King. How will we know if we just kill him? I'm not going to New York tomorrow. I'm not going. And she said, if you have this baby, you're going to have to raise him on your own. I'm not going to help you. I said, you don't have to help me. I'll do it by myself, but I'm not going to New York. And so she looked at me and said, you do understand I'm not going to help you? I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, fine, we won't go. So we moved again. And I stayed pregnant, and she went to work, and I was very alone. I'll just say that.
There was never any adult supervision, but in that she was not doing things that were considered surly or, uncharacteristic of what a child would do. So I don't want to say she was a goody two-shoes by any means, but there was no drugs, there was no alcohol, there was no, wanting to party or invite boys over, or do any of those types of things. It was just really a kind of bare-looking home, very sparsely furnished, and just Kitty. I knew her mom was there or lived there, but I never met her. I never met her one time in all those years. And it became very clear very fast that she was almost on her own at 11. And when she met my mother also took to her, as well as my grandmother. My grandmother really liked Kitty. And when they kind of got a sense that she was on her own, they accepted her and they welcomed her in. And she was given the same things that I was given growing up, in terms of when I was at home and she would visit. If we were, having a meal, she was extended a meal. If my mom took myself out, she would take Kitty as well. So she really was appreciated by my family. And I think that looking back, they recognized that she was fending for herself more than what I had realized as a kid.
I lived a very lonely life. I couldn't go to church hardcore, which is where all my friends were, because the one day that she did take me and everybody found out, my best friend's mother told her that I couldn't talk to her daughter, not to touch her, because I was contagious. And the people in the church were just so horribly mean.
And she endured like a whole bunch of backlash, a whole bunch of negative talk. I remember a lot of the parents who had females at the church, like they didn't want their female children hanging around her. Again, that's something that's a common practice in our community, where we kind of shy away from people that go through that, not knowing the story. We just assume what the story is, and we decide to shun them. And they begin to do that. Even in that, Kitty became a little emotional or distraught, as any child would having a child. But the one thing that I noticed and recognized in her then is that she was determined. She was determined she was going to be great. She didn't care. We had this conversation. She said, I'm not going to be a dummy. I am going to be smart. I'm going to go to school, get an education, and I will be successful, and I'm going to take care of my child. She did just that.
It was soon discovered that she was pregnant, and she was 11, and I was 11. Many of our friends' parents would not allow her to come around once it was discovered that she was pregnant, because they thought that perhaps she was a bad influence. Maybe her ways, whatever they were, would rub off on their own children. So she was almost shunned.
I just assumed that something was wrong because she seemed kind of not very happy. But I noticed that the adults would be looking at her, like at the church, looking at her, pointing at her, making little comments behind her back.
Seventh grade. I was in the 7th grade with a baby. I come in 2 months late from maternity leave. Everybody in the school already knew. And it was insane. It was insane because, one, the kids teased me about being dark-skinned all the time. So I was constantly fighting. But two, like, I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't go to the dance. I couldn't do anything. I wanted to go skating with my friends. My mom would make me take the baby with me, which my friends at school didn't mind, you know, because he was a little kid, but it was hard. Sometimes I would sit in class, and because I was breastfeeding, yes, I breastfed at 12, my breast would leak. So I would be in biology, science class, and one of the kids would say, "Ew, what's that on your shirt? Oh my gosh, that's disgusting." And I would look down and my whole shirt would be wet, you know? And I would have to go. I spent a lot of time at the janitor's office because they would have to wash my clothes and I would have to go in there and pump. Because I felt my baby was hungry. And I would call the babysitter and say, "Is he eating? Because my breasts are leaking. Is he eating?" You know? She's like, "Oh, let me feed him now." So I was nervous and worried because I wasn't sure what was going on there. Wasn't unsure, you know, it was just a very challenging time. So imagine this 12-year-old with huge breasts with milk in them, constantly leaking, and trying to create this friendship or trying to create friendships with people my age who were not parents.
You would see teenage mothers definitely, but at 11 and 12, it was something that was very uncommon to see someone that young pregnant. So the atmosphere was a pretty hostile and unfriendly atmosphere to someone that young having a baby. Sure, there were girls in the old neighborhood in the city that were pregnant at 14, 15, and 16, but she was one of the only ones that was pregnant so young, especially now we're not in Baltimore City, we're in Baltimore County, where it's a different demographic. We're working class. We are a higher echelon, a higher socioeconomic status than what we were in Baltimore City. So it was especially unaccepted in that type of community.
Also being tortured every day for being dark-skinned, every day, darky, blacky, in school, fighting every day. We learned about Paul Revere and this black horse, and they said, "That's D." Everybody laughed, and the teacher didn't seem to care. So I hated school. I cut school all the time.
One of the big things that jumps out to me is the fact that Kitty didn't have much. So my family, my mom also is college educated, just like my grandmom. And at that time, I had a stepfather in the home, and this was a 4-bedroom house. And we were really a working middle class family. So I wasn't privileged, but I had nice clothes and nice things. And Kitty did not. And I think that was another thing that a lot of the kids would distance themselves from, because she didn't have the latest fashions and she didn't have the nicest clothes. They couldn't really see beyond that. And so when we would actually, talk about cultural norms at the time, or pop culture, it was something that was a touchy subject, because I knew that she didn't have much. So even today, I'm not going to sit around and talk about all of the things that I have to a person who's still really struggling. And that's kind of the way that I was back then. So we didn't focus a lot on, what were the latest sneakers, what was the latest fashions, the latest hair, the latest makeup, the latest jewelry, because I knew that was something that she really didn't have, and it was a point that she was bullied on, or pseudo-bullied on, or picked on for not having things. So we really didn't, talk a lot about pop culture. We did like music. We really, really loved rap music. It was not what they said to her, it's what they didn't say. She was socially isolated. She didn't have friends. So it wasn't that everybody talked behind her back a whole lot. It was, I don't really know what's up with her. She's weird. Like, she's strange. What's her deal? And I think that her lack of also trying to force these relationships or readily engage turned people off, turned pre-teenage girls off, because pre-teenage girls, tend to click up and really engage with each other because they are in like this friendship circle. And so her personality was great, as far as I was concerned, and she was very, lively, and again, she was very colorful, but she wasn't really that well received. I think the first thing they saw was, one, her outfits, and two, her complexion. She has a beautiful dark complexion, and there's colorism in our community. And I do believe that a part of her social isolation came from just how she looked on the exterior. So they never really got a chance to get to know her, and she didn't force people to try to get to know her, because she had that maturity in her that lent to, but if you don't want to know me, I don't want to know you. And so that made her appear socially awkward to others, but she wasn't socially awkward at all.
Growing up as a preteen, as a teen mom, is definitely one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Why? Because everyone had opinions. Everyone had opinions. But nobody had solutions. People either wanted to put me down, or they wanted to do it for me. But very few people wanted to take the time to just show me, to just help me. They made assumptions about me. They assumed that because I was a baby, that I wouldn't know how to take care of a baby, as if my maternal instincts wouldn't kick in, as if the core of who I am and what I had experienced would not have shaped me to be a decent parent. Instead, they pointed fingers, they judged me, and had already defined my outcome
and my destiny. And I had to build a wall that pushed everyone out so that I could only hear my voices, because everybody else's voice was not helping me. They were hindering me. I feel like a lot of young ladies who get caught in the welfare system or in the victim system is because everyone is pointing the finger, but they're not holding the hand. And when they are holding the hand and they see that the young woman is angry or has a chip on her shoulder, they take that as if she's not interested in being helped, not really understanding that that's how she's attempting to cope with the situation that's being put in front of her. And for me, after my stepdad touched me and watching my mom bring him back into the house, after going from babysitter to babysitter to babysitter to babysitter, being tortured, raped, abused, molested, beaten, I put up a wall. And when things happen over and over and over again, you have to find your vibration of protection. You have to find your vibration of certainty. You have to find your vibration of clarity.
To experience multiple traumas over the course of years. It is extremely difficult to kind of power through that.
Going into high school over the next year after that, it was a little challenging. And I came home for the summer. I went to visit my mom for the summer in South Carolina and met this guy who saw me and at a church function that they had outside and began to like sing to me, took the microphone, started singing to me and wooed me, took me places, did things with me, for me. We were just together all the time. And this time it was a very mutual thing, you know, and I had grown up a lot at this point. By this time, I think I was 15. And you know, we had sex, I got pregnant. But the moment that he found out I was pregnant, because he was 22 and I was 16, of course my mom threatened him and he said it wasn't his baby.
She was pregnant with EJ, which is her second child, which is my godson. She was stressed throughout the pregnancy. She had a very high stress pregnancy.
So first of all, my son was premature. He was 1 pound, 13 ounces. And he didn't come home for 3 months. So while I was in the hospital, I was in the hospital for 3 months, let me just say that, before I had him, because I had preeclampsia, which is high blood pressure. Okay, so I had a quarter. There's two things. I had a quarter and a pack of paper. And I had put the quarter somewhere in the house and I think somebody moved it. I don't know who moved it. I think I blame Tina though.
She probably did.
It was like, you moved my quarter. And she was like, why are you fussing about a quarter? And I was like, because it was my quarter and you moved my quarter. I was angry. And then something happened with this piece of paper. So what I did was, I said, oh, I'm having stomach pains. So I was like, oh, my stomach.
That was that experience.
My stomach, I'm having stomach pains. So Tina called 911. So the ambulance came, took me to the hospital. I'm sitting in the hospital room eating crackers. Like 2-3 hours going by, the nurse coming. I'm like, okay,
What for attitude?
I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go back home. And she said, go back home? You ain't going home no time soon. I said, oh, yes, I am. She said, oh, no, honey, you've got preeclampsia. You have to stay here until the baby is born. I said, no, you don't understand. Tina made me mad about my quarter. Like, she took my quarter and moved my paper. So I just told y'all that my stomach was hurting to get back at Tina.
Oh, my God. She had an attitude over that.
I was angry over this, right? And so it was all not real, but only to get there and to find out it was real. And I ended up spending the next 3 months in the hospital. And there was another young lady that shared the hospital room with me. And she had preeclampsia because she was pregnant with triplets. And so we would talk every day, and she told me that she was 16 or 17 and that I could get my own place, that I didn't have to worry about staying with other people. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is a great idea. Can you connect me with your landlord? And she said, yeah. And so she did. And after my son was born, and I started to prepare for my son to come home, I called the landlord and got my own apartment. So I was 16 years old with my own place on Myrtle Avenue in Baltimore, which is equivalent to, Murphy Homes, which was the hood. It was the hood of all hoods. It was the projects. It was the big projects.
And when I walked into the apartment, I'm looking like, no, you're not going to be here. I did not like what I saw, and I was like, no, this is not Kitty. This is not where you're going to live. And my experience, as far as, it was horrible. I'm going to just be straight. It was horrible. I did not like the way she was living. And I knew she was to do better. Be honest. I knew she was going to do better.
Me and my son stayed there, and I just have to say that was a very major turning point in my life as well, because I couldn't breastfeed him because he was 4 pounds when I brought him home. And the apartment that I had holes. The holes were like this big in the floor, like where the panels were. They were like this big all over the floor. I didn't have any furniture. I slept on a pallet. I didn't have any curtains. I didn't have a refrigerator. I didn't have a stove. I had a toaster oven, and I was on welfare. Growing up, as a 16-year-old mom living in my own place on Myrtle Avenue was really brutal. My house was horrible. We were definitely infested with lead paint poisoning. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. My landlord was definitely a scumlord. I guess that's what they called them back in the day. I mean, obviously he was renting apartments out to 16-year-old little girls. And I didn't have Section 8 housing. I was paying for the rent through my son's Social Security check. I also was on welfare. So I used a portion of my money to pay rent, and I knew nothing about paying bills or anything like that. Nobody ever sat down with me and said, this is how you budget, this is what credit is, or a checking or a savings, or how you pay rent or anything like that. I had to figure those things out on my own. And so when the young lady at the hospital told me
that this guy could help me, this guy would rent me a place. I was like, okay, great. This is awesome. I can have my own. And I called him. I met him at the place and saw the place and thought there are things I can do with this place with my children.
I remember a time that I went to a place where she lived on her own as a teenager in the middle of Baltimore City on Myrtle Avenue, approximately at age 16. And it was a third floor walk up in a brownstone that had nothing in it except for herself and her child. And there were some milk crates and a place to sleep, a makeshift place to sleep. And I could not believe that my friend, who is my age, was on her own to the point where she was renting an apartment in the middle of a drug-infested neighborhood because she had nowhere else to go.
I met this guy. He was a drug dealer, and he saw me walking down the street with my 2 kids one day, and he's like, "How old are you? Like, what are you doing here?" So I kind of told him what was going on, and he said, "Can I come to your house?" And I said, "Yeah, you can come on in." And I did. I let him come in, and he saw how I was living, and he reached in his pocket, and he pulled out a knot of money, and he gave me $500. And I said, "I'm not a prostitute." And he said, "I want you to go and buy you and your kids things, just things. And you come back in 4 hours, and I'll be here waiting for you." I said, "Okay." So I went out. Man, $500 is a lot of money, right, for me. So I went and bought food and clothes and, different things like that. And when I came back and sat on my front porch, he was coming around the corner in a pickup truck. And he had a box spring and a mattress. He had some crates, a black and white TV, and some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle blankets. And he came into my house and he put everything up and he started nailing the blankets on my walls. And I thought, I'm living right now, furniture.
It was just my place, which was something that I had longed for, right? Ever since I had experienced, being molested and just kind of seeing that my mom was unable mentally to protect me or physically to protect me. Being able to get into my own place gave me an opportunity to have what I desire, which was freedom and to be able to protect myself. And so even though I didn't have any of the necessities that were needed in order to survive, it was enough for me to feel like I can figure it out on my own. And I did, The only thing is that I had guests that lived with me. I had rats that were like this big that were constantly there and infesting my house.
Yeah, I told you I didn't have a refrigerator and a stove, right? Well, this particular night I was high as in happy, just like, yes, I'm doing good. And my youngest son, we didn't have a refrigerator, so there are these glass even flow bottles. I would take the Similac, mix the milk up, and I would put it on a fire escape on the outside so his milk would stay cold so it wouldn't go bad because I didn't have a refrigerator. So the baby wakes up crying, and I go outside to go get his bottles, and the rats had broken every last bottle. And all the money that he had given me that day, I had spent. And the interesting thing is that the food that I brought, I had in the neighbor's refrigerator downstairs. When I went to knock on the door downstairs, they had taken all my food and moved out. So I had no food, I had no money, no refrigerator, no stove. And I called my cousins who lived around the corner, and I was crying on the phone. There's snow everywhere. And they walked 2 miles to the 7-Eleven on Lexington Street to go get some Similac and bring it so that my baby would stop crying.
And I was so embarrassed.
Right.
I was so embarrassed. And they was like, it's not a big deal, Kitty. It's not a big deal. You know, we don't mind. It's for the baby. We don't mind. But I was still really embarrassed because we're all the same age. I got a baby. They didn't have a baby. They had to walk to the store in the snow on behalf of me and my baby.
Well, they was the aunties.
They were, and they were so cool about it. But oh man, that was a very defining moment for me.
Yeah.
You know, that particular night. It was not my ideal place to live, but it was mine. And I spent about 8-9 months there before, maybe even a little bit longer, before I had an opportunity to move into my next location, which was still mine. But this place I'll never forget because I was literally 15 years old, 16, turning 16, so the end of December going into January. And I had my own place. And none of my friends had their own place, even though they lived home with their moms and stuff like that. Like, this was mine. You know, I didn't have to answer to anyone. And, you know, if I got into trouble, it was on me. I didn't have to depend on anyone to protect me because I was protecting me. And I felt like I could do a damn good job of doing that. So my place was pretty big. I had burgundy floors. They were painted burgundy, and I never forget one night I was laying in the bed and I was having this dream that I was being eaten by a rat. And I woke up kind of like in a cold sweat at the thought of being eaten by a rat. But when I opened my eyes, to get my air, I looked up and me and a rat were actually like sitting face to face. It was like, what the hell? And I mean, I screamed, I like threw it off of me and I screamed at the top of my lungs. I looked over and there was a rat sitting on my son he was so little I didn't want to take him out the chair. And he was sitting in his chair asleep and a rat was sitting on his chest trying to get his bottle. And one was on my side. I flipped the rat off my son's chest and I picked him up and I laid him on my chest. I didn't sleep for days. And I didn't know what to do either. Nothing in me said go and call somebody to exterminate the place. I just knew that I was going to protect my children. And I was going to figure it out. So I did not sleep for days. And eventually my body couldn't take it anymore. And I ended up falling asleep. And I never experienced that again. But I definitely had experiences where rats were crawling up my walls, right? Rats were crawling up my walls and definitely all over the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle blankets, and me just really being afraid and really freaking out and trying to figure out what can I do.
I remember one particular time, her lights was turned off. And I went around and I was going every day. When I got there, she didn't want to open the door. And that had never happened before, so I didn't know what was going on. And so when I walked in, she typically was very honest with me. Like we had a very honest friendship. Even to this day, we're very honest about everything. And so that was the first time I think she actually tried to lie to me. She told me that it was an outage in the area because she was always very smart. And when I looked around, it was like at night, everybody's lights were on but hers. And I was like, dang, I've never seen an outage when it's just one house that's out. So she was like, yeah, they're coming back. You know, I called BG&E, which is the electric company. And she said, I called them and they're coming back. They're going to come and fix it. So I said, okay. I didn't think anything of it. Stayed there with her, listening to my friend. The next day I get up. I'm like, they still haven't fixed it, but everybody else is like moseying along. So I come back later that night, same thing. No lights, no nothing. So at this point, we're like burning candles inside of the place. She has, at this time, 2 children. So she came to my house. She stayed at my house with me until, like for a few days until her electricity was able to be turned on. My mom had given her some information to go to get some resources to get some help to get it turned on or whatever.
Like I said, going back to her apartment on Myrtle Avenue, That was a impact. That was a smack in the face. And I wanted her to come back home, but Kitty had this little willpower thing about herself. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this without others helping me. I'm going to show y'all I can do it. And what can I say at the end? She showed everybody. I'm so proud of her. That's Lord, I'm proud.
So recently, I heard Will Smith say something really awesome. He said, you have to learn how to fight and defend yourself from predators without letting your heart go dark. That was a very profound and real statement for me, because it seemed like all my life I was dealing with predators, and all my life I was constantly trying to figure out how to defend myself, right? And I have to admit that, for a long time, I was in a very dark space. I was angry and I had this negative energy about myself. And I just felt like it was me against the world in my Tupac voice. And the world was full of mean, cruel, and horrible people. Family, church, men, all horrible people in my eyes at that point, right? However, as I began to experience life on my own as a teen mother of 2 boys, I have to say that I am so thankful that I allowed myself to open up to a few people who seemed to see me for who I really was, right? They didn't judge me, give me mean looks or stares. They didn't point their fingers at me or talk about me behind my back. In fact, it was the exact opposite, thank goodness. People like Dante and Jasmine and Dorikas and Quentin, Alicia, Tisha, Tina, Dawn, Kizzy, the entire Robinson family, and my Aunt Tammy, of course. They all became a very strong soundboard for me. They saw me for me, they saw my potential, and I know that they genuinely cared about me and my well-being, about my children's well-being. And that really helped me to understand how to juggle life. Those beautiful souls gave me hope. And along with my children, they gave me strength and the power to keep moving every day. So recently, my trainer asked me, D, how are you still able to love men after all the things that have happened to you? And at first, I really didn't even know how to answer that question. But after really thinking about my past, I would say that it definitely had to do with that drug dealer who helped me when I had my first apartment. And I say that because he showed me something so valuable. He showed me that not all men are out to hurt me. That a man, a complete stranger, wanted nothing from me but to see me succeed. He didn't ask for anything in return. Up until that point, I don't think I had really met anybody like that. And to be honest, when I met him, I could tell he was a good guy. I felt safe. And not only did he protect me without wanting anything from me in return, he also ensured my safety while living in that crazy ass neighborhood. But that was just the beginning for me. When I saw that, I knew that he wasn't the only one, right? So going back to Myrtle Avenue, shortly after the rat incidents, and I had more than one naturally, right? I have to admit that I felt so defeated. I was unhappy. Rather, I was happy about being on my own, knowing that I could control my own destiny. But the question was, what was my destiny? I was a teen mom on welfare. By this time, I had dropped out of school, 10th grade, and I was broke. I looked around me and the girls that I saw were like happy with this lifestyle. They enjoyed being on Section 8, getting welfare and food stamps. They almost made it seem like it was cool, like it was a great thing. And while I was thankful for that help, I kept wondering if there was something more for me in particular. I saw the guys on the block selling drugs. They were on drugs or being killed over drugs. And I began to wonder if that was the life that my boys would end up living. I also began wondering if there was something more for my boys in life and if I had the power to control that, right? Because when you live with rats and have very little resources, it really makes you look at life differently. So one day, I was walking down Martin Luther King Boulevard
pushing EJ in a stroller in one hand and holding Lionel's hand with the other, and I began to notice something. I noticed that there were a number of cars passing by me, and that these people weren't walking like I was. They were driving. And not only were they driving, but they were driving nice cars. And for some reason, on this particular day, I kept seeing people driving Mercedes-Benz. And I began to wonder, like, what are these people doing? What are they doing for a living? How are they able to afford this type of car? Like, what's the formula? I know they're not drug dealers. What's the secret formula, right? So that's when it kind of hit me. Like, if I want to create a life to take care of me and my family, I have two options. I can either let my circumstances define me, or I can define my own circumstances. I mean, hell, I had already been doing that the whole time, right?
She never let the fact that she had children at her age stop her from doing what she needed to do. You know how some people use that as a crutch, well, I can't do this and I can't do that. I got kids to take care of. Y'all don't understand. I got kids. No, them kids are the ones who made her get to where she is today. So, yeah.
She kept moving forward. She didn't let that deter her from accomplishing anything that she was determined to accomplish.
So as I'm watching these cars pass by me, I decided that I didn't want to walk anymore. I decided that I didn't want to catch the bus, that I didn't want to live in my current place anymore. I didn't want to be broke, and I didn't want to be a nobody. I didn't want my children to be drug dealers and end up in jail or dead, and I damn sure well didn't want to be a hood rat living on welfare as a statistic. So on that day, in that very moment in time, I made a conscious decision that I was going to do whatever it took for me to see myself in a different situation, to see my children in a different situation. And I couldn't explain it then, but something inside of me just snapped, you know? It just like felt like this burning flame that fully engulfed my body down to my very soul. And I said aloud with conviction, this is not who I am or who I desire to be when I grow up. And I do not want my kids to experience this either. I'm going to move, get off welfare, get a job, buy me one of those Mercedes-Benz. Today, I call that feeling individual audacity.
Having been through some of the things that Dee has been through and experienced some of the things that she's experienced, many people never make that commitment. The commitment to changing their life, the commitment to digging out of a hole that typically people never have the opportunity to get out of. And so the drive, the determination, the grit, the refusal to give up, and the commitment to changing her life is something that many people don't achieve.
So anyway, I hopped on the bus with my two children and I went to the library to figure out like what my options were, like what can I do? And I'll say that that day in itself was such a defining moment for me. It was actually one of the biggest life-changing moments for me, you know? And it impacted me so much that within 3 months, I had moved into a better apartment, got off welfare. I landed my first real job making over $10 an hour, you know? And I was realizing that I had the power to make deliberate decisions for me and my family to define my future at all costs. That's what I did. It was the best thing I could have ever done for myself, you know?
And Kitty didn't feel comfortable. And I knew that something had clicked. It had clicked where she was going to do better. And she did. She did much better. And wherever she went, she took them kids. She had them babies with her. And she took care of her children. She did very well. But like I said, when I saw the big spin, when Kitty had got a job and she got in touch with me, and I'm like, where you working at? And she was telling me about her job and what she was doing. And I was like, wow. And this was before she got into what she's into now. She always had a mind to do good, like go higher.
So with that being said, Getting a taste of the working world was cool. And, while this wasn't my first job, I do have to admit that receiving bigger checks than I did on welfare was freaking awesome, right? But after a while, I began to wonder, would that be enough for me to really get my Mercedes-Benz? It seemed like, I would need to work a gazillion hours to be able to save up for that car. So I started looking for other options as far as employment, right? I got fired from my little job I had, and then I headed back to the library, and I found out that I could work at something called a temp agency. And this agency finds people jobs, you know what I'm saying? So I called a temp agency, made an appointment, got Tina to watch my boys, and I showed up for my interview.
She has always had a work ethic and has had odd jobs, as soon as she was able to get a work permit. I remember her getting, jobs here and there. So I was really a bit taken aback and inspired that she is actually out here working at 15 and 16. And sometimes my grandmom would have the baby babysitting her son just so that she could go to work.
I was about 17 at this point. I just turned 17. And I really done a good job from hiding my age from the world. Don't ask questions. But they brought me in, had me fill out an application. I took the test on a computer to see what my skills were with Microsoft Office. Needless to say, failed the test, didn't get a job, right? So I asked the lady, what type of score do I need to have on this test in order for me to get a job? And she told me 80% or higher. So I asked her if I could get a copy of my test. She gave it to me, and I left. So then I spent the next few weeks taking this 45-minute bus ride to the Towson Library every day of the week with my two boys. And I did this to practice Microsoft Office so that I could pass this test. And I would be there first thing in the morning when the doors open, and I would not leave until the library closed. And looking back now, I was freaking relentless with my mission. So much that God sent me another angel, just like the drug dealer who had helped me before.
Another thing that inspired me about you, you always wanted to work.
Yeah.
You never wanted to lay down and just chill and collect checks. You went out, you worked, you, Dawn, and Kizzy.
Yeah.
Y'all can't even talk about you without adding
I know.
You all always wanted to work, and all of y'all doing very well.
Yeah.
And I'm happy, I'm proud.
Yeah. So one day, I'm at the library. EJ was in a stroller crying like crazy, right? He wouldn't stop crying. And I had really ran out of money and food for the day, but I didn't want to leave the library until it closed. Well, this little old white lady working at the library walked over to me, and she asked me how old I was and if these were my children. And so I told her yes. Then she asked me, where are your parents? I told her I didn't have any. I was very staunch about that, right? She asked me, what are you doing here every day with these kids? I told her that I was trying to get a temp job as a receptionist, but every time I go to the agency, I failed the Microsoft Office test. So I showed her my test scores. So she looked at me and she asked me again, are these your children? I replied, yes, ma'am. She told me, okay, you sit right here. So then she walked away and she came back with some crackers and some juice in her hand for me and the boys. She said, I've been watching you come up here over the last couple of weeks. Take this food, go home, and be back up here first thing tomorrow morning, and don't be late. Now, you can only imagine that I was freaking paranoid, right? I had no clue what she was planning. And a part of me was like, do not go back to that library. This could be a setup. She's going to try to take your kids away. And during the whole bus ride home, I was like, oh my God, what's my next move? But I decided that I would go. And if I needed to run, I knew I was fast and I could get away if I needed to. So not really knowing what to expect, the next day, I went back to the library first thing in the morning. And it was really surprising that her and the staff were almost at the door waiting for me and the boys. And one of the ladies took the boys to the back section of the library, and then she took me to the computer section. And for the next 30 days or so, she worked with me literally every day and helped me master Microsoft Office until I passed the test and got a job paying $13 an hour.
So I'm a person of strong faith, And I do believe that we're destined for certain things. I've always believed that Kitty was destined for greatness. Even in growing up, she's worked from being a young teen, probably 14, 15, 16, we worked summer jobs, but she had a job outside of school because she had a child.
So that was just an amazing, opportunity. And it was also another confirmation that everyone that I come in contact with is not a bad person. There are some horrible people out there that are, 100% looking to hurt. But there are also some people out there that are absolutely phenomenal. And I have come across many of those people in my lifetime, and they have shown me how to be an amazing person. So whenever I have an opportunity to stretch my hand out and to help someone, I try to do so, because there are people who have literally taken the time to hold their hands out and extend themselves to me and my boys.
Okay, I remember when I was before the age of 5, and me and my creator, we would go out, and we would go just to the mall, just go get something to eat, and all I knew is we was rushing home because Batman and Spider-Man was coming on, and that was something, and X-Men, that was something we was just into, so we'd be rushing home just to go home and watch it. And, we'd eat and we'd watch TV. And this is something that we had been doing for years. Me and her, we was a tag team. We was going at it together. And then my brother came. So we had a third addition to the family. And it was still cool. It was all of us. And nothing really changed until I was about to turn 5. And I had to leave her. And I was going with Josephine Williams. And Josephine, she would take care of me for the next few years.
So I'm 17. I moved to Washington, D.C. to get out of Baltimore. And I asked my great aunt to keep my son while I went back to school to get my GED. And, back in the day, you go to your grandmother's house, you live with your grandma. It's not a big deal. Well, my great aunt decided that I needed paperwork involved in order for her to get my son into school. And so she called me and she said, I'll keep him. And but you got to sign this paper so that we can get him into school. And I said, okay, that's fine. So we go into this office and she says, listen, this paper is just so that we can get him into school. It's not a big deal. And I said, okay, I trust you. And I put my signature on the paper. I didn't read the paper at all. I just signed it. Trusting her. Picked up my little son, and my oldest son stayed at my aunt's house. And me and my youngest son moved to Buffalo, New York. Stayed there for a month and a half. Realized I was thinking something's not right. I'm always calling my son, but she was always saying he was asleep, or he was at school, or he was taking a bath, or he was eating. Then another month and a half, goes by. I moved back to Baltimore. And I send my youngest son to my mom's because I never got my GED. It wasn't working right. And one day I got really sick, or I felt sick. I felt sick on the inside. I was like, oh, something's not right. What's going on? And something just hit me. I realized I haven't talked to my son in 3 months. So I called her again and she said, oh, he's in the tub. I said, I don't care. Let me speak to him. And she says, well, like I said, I said, let me speak to him now. Put him on the phone now. Now, put him on the phone. And she said, no. And I said, why? And she said, because he's no longer your son. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, that is my son. She said, he's not your son anymore. He's my son. And I said, no, ma'am, that's my son. She said, you signed the papers. He's my son. And I hung up the phone immediately. And I had this box. And I went, this box of papers, I like fumbling through the box, pulling papers, pulling them out the box. I go and look at the piece of paper and I read it. And I had given away my son. I had given custody away. I'm like reading. And I had given away, I looked at it and I understood at that moment in time.
I didn't know what was happening behind the scenes of this event, but I eventually did find out.
Funny thing is that she was telling my son I didn't love her. That the reason why I gave him away was because I didn't love him. And he never knew until he got older that every day I harassed this lady every day. Let me speak to him. What church you going to this week? She would tell me, and I would go to the church and she would go to another one. Then I would ask her the next week, what church you going this week? She would tell me, I would go to that one and she would tell me another one. So I finally started figuring out her patterns. And I asked her one day, what church you going to? And she told me, so I went to the opposite church and she was there with my baby. And I came with gifts in hand. And I walk up to him, I'm darn near in like tears. And I walk up to him and I'm like, Lionel, and I'm like ready to hug him. And he was so mean to me. And he says, so you decided to finally come. I said, what are you talking about? I've been calling, I've been coming every week. I mean, I'm like trying to explain to him, he's a little boy. Every week I'm trying to come. It's like, you haven't been looking for me. You don't love me. I was like heartbroken. I can't even tell you. So, and I never forget my cousin saying to me, I don't even understand why you're making a big deal about this. I mean, you're young, you're beautiful.
I believe Dawn said that because, you know, she figured that you being young, at that age, you should have had your freedom.
Yeah.
And you should have just been enjoying life like that. But you, as a mother, you knew that you needed your child in your life, and you knew that, you know, you had a feeling that something wasn't right, and they was saying things to him that wasn't right because the way he reacted to you when he finally saw you.
Yeah.
So I understand.
So I called the bishop of the church, and I called, and he said I'm gonna call her. And she talked to him, and she called me back and said, I don't care. He's my son, not yours. So then I called an attorney, and the attorney said, do you have a home? And I said, no. He said, do you have a husband? I said, no. He said, do you have a job? And at that time I didn't. He said, you're never gonna get your kid back. I said, well, what do I have to do to get him back? He said, you need a job, you need a house, and you need a husband, and probably a car. So I said, okay. So then everything in my world changed again, because now everything in my life was about getting my kid back. Everything I did, every waking moment, everything I did.
She had a hard time with that because she was essentially homeless. And so she had Eric, and the issue with the custody was that she didn't have a stable home, I believe. And as an adult, we talked about maybe there was some financial gain that other people, you know, was receiving to keep Lionel. We know that happens in many families, that they'll use a child or an elderly person because there's some financial gain there. So we have talked as adults about maybe that was some of the motivation for her not being able to get Lionel back, but it was veiled as you're homeless, you're not stable, you're loose, and all these things that she's been hearing all of her life, hearing that from her own family as the reason for not giving back the baby.
She She told me I would never see him again. And I told her she had lost her mind and that, of course, I was going to see him again. This was just the starting point. So I just went on this mission to find a husband so that I could buy a house, so I could buy a car, so I can get my kid back.
So I look at it as an adult, I think about being victimized. That was just her being a victim again, not by choice, ever by choice, but her having that target on her. She was a victim of sexual assault. She was a victim of bullying. She was a victim of social isolation. She was a victim of her family abandonment. She was a victim of just being separated from her child. So I look at her in all these instances of where she has lost things, where she has been victimized, where she's been a target. And I think about how she responded then was purely emotionally driven. It was always, what we can do about it. We didn't think a lot about what were the motivations or why it was happening. We thought, well, you have a place to stay. You're not homeless. Why won't they give back the baby? We're going to just go and take them. If we see this person, then we're going to do this. So we didn't think a lot about why it was happening. We just knew that it was happening and we should do something.
I saw a lot, like when we would see him at the house of prayer, he was sad. He never smiled. And we knew it was the pain. We knew he was sad from missing his mommy. So I saw a lot of hurt in him as a young boy.
I remember when Kitty's aunt had Lionel. She had EJ, but the aunt had Lionel. And she wanted all of her children together. She wanted Lionel and Eric to grow up together. I remember her aunt feeling that Lionel was better off with her versus being with Kitty.
Going through it, it was tough to see because I knew that she wanted to be with her son. She had already developed a relationship with Lionel. We all had developed a relationship with Lionel. And then he was gone. And not only was he gone, the way that I recall it was he didn't come around much. There wasn't much contact that she even had with him during the period of time that he was gone. So as a younger person, you are there as the champion, you're the cheerleader, you're the person that has her back. You're ready to go kick down some doors and handle people and do whatever it is that you need to do to be a great friend, to your friend that's trying to have this child, trying to get back their child. However, as an adult, looking back at it, I can actually see that emotionally it was draining for her. And while we were rah-rah and we're going to go and kick some tail and get them back and take them back, that was how we responded because we didn't have any other coping strategies. We didn't know how to respond. We didn't have enough life, situations under our belt. So, but as an adult looking back at it, you can clearly see that we were just emotionally driven and not really understanding all of the dynamics that were at play as to why there was such a resistance to reunite Kitty with Lionel.
I started working 3 jobs. I was recruiting during the day. I worked at Wawa, a 24-hour shift at night. I was waiting tables in the evening. No sleep, 7 days a week. So finally, I got a day off.
When I was about to turn 7, my creator came and got me. I had her for a week, I think. It was a week. We went to the movies. We saw Men in Black. We saw George of the Jungle. I went back to her home and she had this big box for me. It had all the new Power Rangers in it. It had the Blue Centurion, the Phantom Ranger, the Morpher, some new shades, some comic books. Like, she had a whole gift set for me. And I'm saying this because she made that moment just magical. And the moment that she saw me, it was absolutely magic. And then the whole week, it was just fun. But I could never forget her face, despite I haven't seen her really much in years. She may pop by every now and then, but I looked at her as mommy. That was who she was. She was mommy, period. And I never really looked at any other situation that was different. Like, I never thought about, who's my dad, you know? And I never thought what was really going on. All I knew is I was staying with Josephine for a little bit. That was it. While she was getting her money together, while she was getting herself together. And it wasn't like, and people didn't ask me questions. People was not like, where's your mom at? Or anything like that, or where's your dad? They was basically asking me, are those your grandparents that you're living with? Because Josephine and her husband, they were old, but they were also great guardians for what they were. And they loved me. And it was the summer of 98, I think, that I was going back with my creator. At this point, she told me what happened. She had told me what was going on. She dropped it all like a nuclear warhead. This is what happened. These people are trying to steal you from me. I'm fighting. She's told me what she was going through. I got to see video footage of her on talk shows, listening to her tapes of her on the radio, seeing letters. You know, she's telling people like last few years she's been fighting to get her children back. And I didn't know how to really take that because I was a spoiled kid. And I just knew that we was in a bad situation. And the thing is, when I was living with her before I left, I knew we was in a bad situation. But I didn't know how bad it was until I went with Josephine. So I knew we was living, it was just horrible. As a child, you don't really say, oh, my mom's doing the best that she can, and this is what's going on. I just know that it's rough. And I didn't want to go back to that. I wanted to go live with the Guardians. You know, they had a nice place. So I got everything I wanted, and it was cool.
And it created a very stressful environment for Kitty. Even in showing how much she had matured, her having a stable environment for him to move in, just showing like all of the key points of things that you would need to show, like, listen, I'm ready. Her aunt wasn't willing to give her back Lionel. I just remember being a very traumatizing time for her. And then as time passed, she, of course, eventually got Lionel back, which was one of the greatest joys in her life, that he was home. It wasn't a major adjustment for her because she wasn't, I think some of the things that was embedded in him when he got back home, initially he wasn't very like receptive to a lot of things that she would tell him. He would always say, well, Aunt never told me that I had to do this, or she told me I didn't have to do this way. Just kind of a little ornery, which wasn't him. Lionel was a very low-key, mild, mellow young man, has always been that way, so it was different. So it created more challenges than what she expected.
You went back and got him?
Yeah.
Lionel was something else.
Yeah.
But he was so intelligent. He wasn't like a little child. He was very intelligent.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at him, I'm like, Lionel, okay. He was, my mommy came and got me, and I'm so happy my mommy came and got me. And he was really into it. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, he knew what was going on.
Yeah.
They was trying to keep him from you.
Yeah.
And, you know, you talked to him and everything, but
She did get me back. She eventually did get me back. And I got to see how hard someone fights for what they want to believe, for what they believe in. How you wouldn't let the state tell you anything differently. How you wouldn't let the church tell you anything differently. How you have the entire system working against you. And she didn't care. She just kept fighting and fighting until she had her children back. You know, I mean, married a guy she didn't love, made sure she clawed her way to get a stable job, made sure she had 2 cars, made sure she had a great place, made sure she was in a great neighborhood. She did everything that her family basically told her she couldn't do. Basically told her she wouldn't amount to. And when I was with Josephine and the rest of their family, all they ever told me was, your mom don't love you, or you don't need to be with your mom. And I'm like dead serious. This is all that these people would say, you're better off with Josephine. They don't know how hard she was fighting. They don't know what she was going through. And when you go back with her, you know, she's happy. She's proud. You know, she got her children back. That's literally her first big accomplishment. And because of that, she didn't stop. Because it wasn't that she got her children back, this is it. Now she wanted to give her children the world she had been trying to create for them. So that wasn't going to stop her. And looking back, it was just, you know, you're a child and you don't really see you don't see the whole story. You don't see the whole picture. And she threw her heart out. You know, she let me know. And she was like, no secrets. I'm not going to hold anything back. This is everything it is. I'm just going to drop it to you. So that's why our relationship is basically full frontal. We go at each other face to face. We let it all out, no holds barred. And she's strict with me. She's strong. When it comes to the other two, it's simple. You know, she'll cut corners. She'll just lay it on them a little bit easy. When it comes to me, no, none at all. Because I'm supposed to be the one that does understand her. And this is a woman that even when she wasn't with me was telling me, Lionel, you're better than everybody else. You're gonna be better than everybody else. You are a leader and you're gonna be a leader and you're gonna be the best at the world at what you do. Lionel don't care about what any other opinions are. And this is all this woman was instilling in me. This is all she would tell me, and I mean since a child. And even when she left me, every time she'd see me just for a moment, that's what she'd be telling me. And people now, when they just see me, I don't see the way I walk, and I don't really listen to how I talk, but everybody around me tells me, Lionel, you must think you're better than everybody. You always have your head held high. You're always walking with a smile. The way you talk is just like you talk like you're superior. And that's not my mentality per se. I'm not trying to talk down on anybody, but that's what people get when they talk to me. That's the image people get out of me. And I'll never be apologetic for who I am because I get it from her.
I went to Randallstown to my oldest son's first babysitter because I still stayed in contact with her. Hung out with her during the day. The neighbor downstairs was cool, so I hung out with them during the day. And they said, I want to introduce you to somebody who's in the neighborhood. So I said, okay. So we finally got an officer in the neighborhood. I said, that's cool. So I went outside, they introduced me, and I stood outside and talked to the officer for a long time, just about life, you know, about things that were going on and, you know. And so when it was time to go, it got dark. And I caught the bus everywhere at that time. And I was 18, 19 at this point. And I was ready to go home, ready to get the bus home. But my neighbors, the babysitter and the neighbor were leaving, and they said, you can't catch the bus home in the middle of the night. You know, it's too late. It wasn't the middle of the night. It was like 7 or 8, but it's too late. This officer can take you home. And I said, nah, I'm good. I mean, I catch the bus all the time. It's not a big, not that big of a deal, And it's like, no, he can take you. He's like, yeah, I can take you home. And I was like, okay, well, it's like he's a cop. And I thought, okay, he's a cop, that's cool. So it was like, all right, I see you in a couple of weeks. I was like, all right, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And so then I said, whenever you're ready, I'm cool. And he said, well, I got to run to my house and get something, and you can come on up. And I was like, no, I'm good. I'll just sit out here and wait for you. I'll sit on the curb. And he's like, it's dark outside. You're not going to sit on the curb. I'm an officer. Look, I'm going to show you my badge. That's my cop car. You don't have anything to worry about. Come on upstairs. I'm going to get a few things. And then, I'll take you home. So I was like, okay, he's a cop. They trust him. What could go wrong? Right? What could go wrong? So I go upstairs in his house. I'm sitting on the sofa, and he's fumbling in the back. And he comes out with an ironing board, and he goes back in the back. And I felt that feeling again, like, you gotta leave right now. And so when he comes back out again, he puts the iron on the ironing board. He starts ironing his shirt, and then he walks back to the back again. And when he walked back to the back, I got up very slowly, and I started walking towards the door, and I started to unlock the door. And when I went to take the chain off, all I heard was click, click. And he said, I'll put this bullet in your head right now if you pull that chain off that door. And so I turned around and I looked, and he was pointing a gun at me. He said, sit your ass down. So I thought, can I get out of here without him shooting me? Is he gonna really shoot me? Should I just run? Should I stay? He said, don't think about it too hard, because my finger is trigger happy. So I sat down, and he proceeded to iron his clothes. And then he didn't say anything much, really, to be honest with you. He was very quiet, but the things he did say were very condescending. But I didn't say anything. At this point in my mind, I was thinking, I already know what's about to happen, but I can't get to that door fast enough without him killing me. So he walks to the bathroom, holding my hand, runs the bath water, and I felt like I was 8 again. I felt like I was 8 all over again. Literally. And so he told me to take my clothes off. I already knew the routine. So I did, and he bathed me. And then he proceeded to take full advantage of me the entire night. So the next morning, I get in the car, and he says to me, where's your driver's license? And I said, I don't have a driver's license. He said, where's your ID? And I said, in my wallet. He said, let me hold it. Let me see it. So I took it out. And he takes it and he holds it in his hand. He says, if you ever tell anybody, I will run a check. I will come kill you and everyone that you know. Do you understand me? And I said, I'm gonna tell anyway. So he pulls over, pulls the gun out of his pocket, puts it to my temple, and this or this, your choice. I said, I won't say a word. He started laughing. I said, it doesn't matter, nobody's gonna believe you if you tell them anyway. Ha 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 ha, and then get the fuck out of my car. I didn't even know where I was. He dropped me off at the bus stop. When I looked back in the car, He was laughing. When I looked to my right, there was another officer there. So I started walking towards the officer, and I just thought, what do I have to lose at this point? And then he rolled the window down and tapped his shirt, just where he put my license or my ID at the time. He said, your choice. I just looked at the other officer. I just turned around. The officer looked at me and said, ma'am, you okay? I said, I'm fine. And I got on the bus. I got on the train. I cried so hard. I just decided, I think I'm gonna kill myself at this point. I think I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna kill myself. I don't even think I even wanna be here anymore. And I thought about my kids. And I wondered what would happen to them and all the things that I was working so hard for. So I swept it under the rug and kept moving. So yeah, my feelings definitely changed about police officers after being in a situation where you thought you could trust someone and then they took advantage of that trust. I didn't know that cop before that day. You know, he was someone that was in the neighborhood, and you know, the people that I were there with trusted him enough to take me home because they cared about me, and he took advantage of that opportunity. I never forget, after a couple of years after that happened, I had held on to what had happened on the inside because he threatened me, right? Because he told me he would kill my family. He would kill me and my family. And so I'll never forget meeting another cop who was interested in me. And after he, you know, asked me about my age, he asked me how I felt about cops. Now, I didn't know he was a cop at the time because he was an undercover narcotic cop. And, but he asked me, he said, how do you feel about police officers? And I said, 50-50. And he said, why? And I said, because I had a bad experience with an officer. And he said, a bad experience or a bad experience? And I said, a really bad experience. And he said, do you mind telling me what happened? And so I told him what happened. And that was the first time I had really shared that story. And he asked me the guy's name. Did I know the guy's name? And I said, I only remember his first name. And I told him, and he described the cop. And I said, yeah. That's like, do you know him? And he's like, yeah, he works in my precinct. And they've had tons and tons of complaints against him. And so much that they put him on meter duty. And I said, well, look, why didn't you tell? Why don't you guys do anything? And he said, because it's a code. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, it's a code. It's a code we don't break. He said, but we know, but it's a code. And that day I was so perplexed and I was so hurt, but I was also so liberated because I realized for the first time that that situation wasn't my fault. And you might be watching this and you might be saying, you know, how could you ever think it was your fault? I thought it was my fault because my first instinct, my first mind said for me to take the bus home at the time. But instead I listened to people, friends who said, no, this guy's trustworthy. But my initial instinct said to take the bus, and I felt like I should have listened. So after it happened, I really blamed myself for 2 years. I blamed myself. This is my fault. And after talking to that cop and finding out that this guy was doing this to other women and to, you know, other things, you know, I realized that it wasn't my fault, that this cop was just sick. But then once I liberated myself, I became angry. I became angry that the police officer that I was talking to and his precinct didn't feel the need to hold that officer accountable. And, you know, it was accepted and they allowed him to think that it was acceptable. So I don't know how many other women he has done this to and how many other cops are out there doing the same thing. But if I could change anything, you know, I would go back and I would risk everything and I would tell. So if you're in this situation, don't hold it in for 2 years. Tell.
Today, I don't blame my mom for her ignorance in parenting. I've had major ignorance around my parenting style over the years. Hell, I was 12 years old when I gave birth to Lionel. I definitely didn't know what I was doing. And even some of the things that I hated that my mom did with me from a parenting perspective, I instilled those. I did those things to Lionel because that was the only canvas that I had had as a parent. It wasn't until one day that I decided consciously that I wanted to remove the canvas that had been shown to me and to create my own canvas, to start fresh from anew, and that I was going to define what the right parenting style was for my children. That took a lot of strength, especially since I was about 17 and not really sure what it even, meant to be a parent other than protection and providing, right? Because I think as a parent, for me, as a core, my ideals around parenting just comes in 3 phases: protection, providing, and unconditional love. And I've always felt like I would be willing to do just about anything to provide those 3 core areas to my children. So in the beginning, when I started raising Lionel and Eric, I had no clue as to what I was doing. And I knew that I didn't want to do what my mom had did because I felt so passionate about her parenting style being the worst. In my words, they were the worst for me. She's an amazing mother to my little brother, and she's an amazing grandmother. But as a mom to me, being the first child, my expectation of a parent, she was not. Growing up and being a parent of my own now and understanding the dynamics around parenting, I understand that my mom did the best that she could. She worked with what she knew, and she tried her best to figure it out. And when you are limited by resources, you use what you have. So today, I don't blame my mom. I actually praise her for the work that she did. I think that she's a hero because we had very few resources. And with all of her might, everything in her, she tried to figure it out. And it takes a lot to try to figure something out with limited resources.
why I call her the creator. I don't call her mom, I don't call her mother, because I believe those ideas are too beneath her. She's better than that. She's the creator. And everybody keeps like, why do you call her the creator? And I'll give them an essay on why I call her the creator, why she really is just that much better than what a mother is. And that's how I honestly believe. And I could keep going, but her drive and her passion, we bounce it off of each other. And it literally stems from childhood. And as it works its way up to teenage years and it works its way up to adulthood, she didn't know how to make an excuse. And she never gave me an opportunity to make an excuse. So when I'm talking to people, I don't want to hear excuses. I want to hear solutions. How can I help you? How can you help yourself? You can't do something, well, that's just an excuse. Why can't you do it? And no matter what story you tell me, it's an excuse. And it literally comes back from her greatest achievement of getting her kids back, when I know plenty of people, you hear stories of someone losing their kids and that's a wrap. And this is a woman, again, she didn't let the state stop her. She didn't let the church stop her. She didn't let the system stop her. For years, she was getting hammered. Just no, and she didn't care. She didn't care. And when she finally triumphed, all she could do was keep going and keep being. She didn't sit there and relish in her victory. No, to her victory wasn't over yet. So she kept going. And I was literally with her when she created a business from scratch, then created a second business from scratch, and then watched her kingdom fall apart. And then she went to go work for somebody else. And I literally said, why are you working for someone? You've already built a business, you can do it again. And what did she do? She literally quit her job to start her own business again. And then for the last 7 years, that's what she's been doing, and made 2 more businesses from that. And she keeps going. She didn't make an excuse as to why she's working for someone. She said, you're right. Picked herself up and kept going. And you can't make excuses in life. There's always a way. This is a woman who, no matter what, she finds a way. When she was diagnosed with cancer, and she told me and my brother, she was literally preparing us for her death that year. She felt like it was just that bad. We need to be ready in case she's gone. But then she felt like that was giving up, and she wasn't going to give up. She felt like she was making an excuse, and she wasn't about to make excuses. So she picked herself up and kept going. She ignored it. And soon we forgot all about it until it came back. And she just was like, whatever. And then went and tackled it again. She didn't let that stop her career. She didn't let that stop the journey she was on. She kept going.
When I was younger, I played trombone. She would try to make it to a concert or make it to like a track meet or a choir performance or something like that. She would always make it a point to do that, to come there to support us in whatever we wanted to do. There were moments that she didn't support some things. She would make it very clear, but even then, it was always in like our best interest. One thing, like the hair I have now, I know when I was younger, she didn't want me to have it because there was like a negative image of dreadlocks. I think there still is. And she told me, no, you have to cut your hair. It has to be neat. It has to be, groomed so that you can get a good job and really like be successful. And that was always something she strived for. I think the lowest grade wasn't even acceptable. She wouldn't get too mad on it. It was like a C, but she always wanted us to excel. And I guess the main thing, discipline probably is the main theme here, because I remember the most whenever I would get in trouble at home. It was always mainly about school. I was a horrible student. And she would say, okay, well, since you failed this class, you're going to do this amount of homework. So I know there was a time when I was punished for like 2 months, and I would have to like read my brother's books. He was in 12th grade. I was maybe like in in like 6th or 7th, and I would have to go and read his books and study his books. So, of course, later on, like, all those classes were really easy to me. And even, like, she'd make us do book reports, she'd make us write essays to our teachers. Teachers never even got them. She would just make us do it. Write 5 pages of like, saying we're sorry and why we did it, and she made rules for all the essays, and it was kind of crazy. Like, but I mean, it's good, because it keeps me leveled, and yet at the same time, it makes me want to do more.
There was one time I went through this bad breakup situation. I made a very messed up, terrible decisions that I regret to this day. And those decisions really my mom looked at me very differently. And that was the most hurtful thing I've ever felt in my life, the way how she looked at me disappointed, and how she felt like I could have done better, and how she looked at herself and said I could have done better, and blamed herself for my mistakes. And for that was the most hurtful time of my whole life. And I was grounded for like a long time, got pulled out of school, the whole 9. And the one thing my mom did was give me books. And she gave me books to teach me what I did wrong. She went over what I did wrong, told me what I should have done. She gave me books on what I should have done, what I should do next time. And she taught me the same way when I was a little kid, which taught me to think better. And one time she brought me to one of her trips. It was Tony Robbins. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go with you. I feel like it's gonna be a good opportunity. I go there, and when I went there, I feel like she really saw me as a human being. She saw me as a person who also had problems, insecurities, issues, because I felt like in her eyes before, she thought I was just the perfect girl who got everything she wanted, spoiled and all the things that she wanted. How could she be unhappy? And when she saw my true colors at that convention, or what I call a adult rave party, she was really surprised, and I really feel like she saw me more as a human being than as just a little girl or a daughter. And when she really realized that I was more of a human being, she kind of said, okay, I understand now. And after that, our relationship got a little bit more open. So I'm very stubborn. I don't know if people know that, but I am. And before, I would shut down or just shut everyone out. But when I'm with her, even to this day, if I'm upset and she asks, I always tell her how I feel. And that makes our relationship 10 times better, in my opinion. Because when she saw me as a human and she knew that I also had extra feelings deep down inside that I wouldn't tell anybody, she knew that she needed to open up more. And when she did, that really helped me. And so I won't have to be in the dark time again. And I feel like that was the best thing she could have ever done for me. I'm gonna cry. I don't want to cry yet. And I'm just so thankful to have her in my life. And I just really hope. I'm just glad she's my mom. I want to laugh, but I'm really happy. Let it go. That's okay. I'm just really glad she still wants me in her life. Because there's other people that have moms and they just throw their daughters away. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I'm glad she's my mom, and I wouldn't want anybody else in the whole world. And I'm also glad I have great brothers too, like Lionel and EJ, because I don't think without them, my childhood would be really weird. I'm just really happy now. So, yeah, that's it.
So back then, I didn't have some big vision for my life, when I was younger. I just knew that I wanted to be more and that I wanted to do more. I knew I didn't want to struggle, I didn't want my children to struggle, and I didn't want to be a statistic.
One of the things that really is inspirational about Kitty at this point is she helped me formulate my own company.
These inspire me to do a lot of things. I've been always trying to follow my dream as a singer and everything, and right now she's been helping me, and telling me advices and, pushing me to do it, and that, I really love that because right now I have a song and I'm working on my dream, and I think I'm gonna success. So Dee is behind that too, because she's been helping me a lot and telling me everything to do it,
She has an ability to create something out of nothing. And I believe, when you're a teenage mother, when you're pushed to the side, when you're told you aren't worth anything, when you're not supported, it forces you to do the things that you need to do to survive. And I believe she's taken those same rules and applied them to the rest of her life as she's gotten older.
A friend that in all that she's done in her life, all that she's accomplished in her life, she's always wanted her friends to accomplish that and greater. It's never been with her that she wanted just her, I'm the greatest and then you stay here. She was always, I'm here, I want you to be here. She always wanted us to be above her, to give her something to work towards. So I'm gonna come up here with you, you come up here with me, I'm gonna come, just keep climbing. She was always determined that it's never settled, never settled.
Something great about her is that she always wants to keep going forward and towards the next best thing. I think I heard my brother say it's like that something you can always do better. That's what I saw growing up. And me, I kind of have this personality now where I'm kind of content in some areas, but she never is, and that's actually a good thing.
She inspires other people to build themselves up, to build a kingdom, to build just an inch of bravery, to get back up and keep going.
When I heard that she was a teen mom, it was kind of like, whoa. So my mom was like, Tupac, Brenda has a baby. Mom was like that. Oh, my mom had a baby at this age. And I'm thinking, and she's still here, she's rocking it, and she's living in this nice big house. I was amazed.
If you take a look at the amount that Dee has achieved in her lifetime, it's a testament to her intellectual capacity, her emotional resources, and just her drive and grit. There are many people who would have gone through such trauma and never made it half as far.
I think what the world is seeing right now, or what the people who are around her are seeing right now, is what's been there all along. So the secret was always a wide open secret. She always had a loving heart and that spirit, that fighter spirit, that entrepreneurial spirit, that, I'm thinking 3 steps ahead. I'm thinking about my future. I'm thinking about my safety, my stability. That was the secret.
I'm looking forward to hearing her name as a leader, as an expert in the area of recruitment, in the area of whatever it is that she's interested in, whatever it is that she's doing at that time. And so knowing all of those things, that for me was her inspiration for me to see this woman who was able to deal with all of that adversity and still not allow it to keep her from moving forward. She's used it as a catalyst, something to catapult her, something to continue to push her forward. And so that's what I've learned from her.
Today, even though I've accomplished so much in my life, I'm an amazing mom, serial entrepreneur, author, motivational speaker, tech startup co-founder, publisher, and producer, my dreams are still bigger than the universe itself, honestly, right? Let me tell you what I will accomplish before I leave this earth. What I will accomplish. I will sit with Oprah and Gail and drink tea and talk and read. I have seen so many times in my dreams. I will drink lemonade with Steve Harvey. Melinda Gates and I will impact women of color through technology. I will continue to speak and inspire people all across the globe, but on a larger scale, right? I'm gonna open for Tony Robbins, and one day I'm gonna fill stadiums with hundreds and thousands of people around the world, inspiring them and helping them to find and use their individual audacity Audacity through my own live events. Gary Vaynerchuk and I, we're gonna rub elbows and we're gonna kick some real knowledge to the people out there. Lisa Nichols and I will help women find their calling. And to top it off, I'm gonna build schools here in the US that will teach academics, culture, business, tech, and most importantly, life. Honestly, I feel like I'm just getting started, you know? I have so much to give to the world, and I don't feel like there's anything holding me back. I mean, if I can make it through all of these hardships, curveballs, and setbacks that life has thrown my way, I'm sure there's room for me to do more, right? So I know that I was put here to show people how to get back up again when people get knocked back down. To show people how to be courageous in the face of adversity, how to cope with life's challenges and win, right? Because some people say that I was given the gift of tenacity and perseverance and grit, but I always say that I was given the power of individual audacity. My name is Dee Williams, and you've only heard a piece of my story here today. I now invite you to open your mind and your heart to, number one, sharing this documentary with everyone you know, because everyone is experiencing something in their life in some form or fashion. And number two, to read my story, the book, Individual Audacity. You think you know the whole story, but this was just a teaser. I really appreciate you, and I'm humbled that you've taken the time to watch my documentary. Can't wait to catch you in the book or at one of my live events. Thanks for watching.